It is the 200 level, Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a Wednesday afternoon. And it's time to talk football again after a bye week. And it's always weird in the middle of a season to just have this interruption. All the momentum, all the mojo you have as a fan, and for those that tailgate like I and my group of friends do, and for those that put all the mental and physical bandwidth into football Saturdays, you wake up one Saturday and there's not a game. And on one hand, it's kind of nice. I will admit that last Saturday, just watching football without a vested interest and not having to have that pit in my stomach as to whether or not Illinois would win, it was a welcome break. And on the other hand, there was a little bit of an emptiness to it because during football season, I know there's only so few of them that we actually get to wake up bright and early, like it's Christmas morning, and get ready for an Illinois football game. Now, for most of my lifetime, that's not been the case. I wake up on a Saturday, it's a 3-9 season, and who really gives a crap? But that's not where Illinois is at now. So we have these bye weeks. I did one basketball podcast. I took last week off because there's not a lot of conversation to have during bye weeks. Plus, I was busy working on that tailgate rig with my friend Kenton. So that battleship will hopefully be fully operational on November 1st. And now we get ready for not just a game, but a rather large one in terms of playoff implications, postseason implications. And really, I think what makes this Washington game particularly interesting is how we as a fan base feel about this team when all is said and done. It is weird to be sitting here at 5-2 and feel as if the temperature of the fan base is muted in some ways, that it's not this sort of overjoyed, oh my God, I can't believe we're 5-2 yet again. Now, in my mind, I'm happy as a clam that this team is 5-2, despite what happened against Indiana and Ohio State. I wish it wouldn't have happened the way it did in Bloomington. I wish we would have played a cleaner game against Ohio State. Made that a bit more interesting, or maybe sprung a historic upset. But as it stands, 5-2, with your two losses to number 1 and number 2. Two teams that I don't think will lose this regular season, if you look at their schedule, and plus just how good they've been anyway. And I'm a little bit surprised that there's not more maybe juice or excitement. Maybe I'm not doing a good job of kind of, taking the temperature of the fan base, but it does seem that last year, because of all that build up to the Michigan game and the fact you won it and you were 6-1, there was a bit more juice at this exact time of year than there was last year. In fact, if I recall, it would have been this week we would have been preparing for the game at Oregon. And even though we kind of knew it wasn't going to go great, we thought we're 6-1 and maybe this team just does something special. And even if they don't, we had one of the best football Saturdays ever on the 100th anniversary celebration of Memorial Stadium. This year, in a way, has lacked, I guess, in some people's eyes, that marquee win. And it didn't help that Duke and USC didn't do their jobs on Saturday. Thank you, freaking Manny Diaz and Lincoln Riley, for being complete dopes. But I actually think it's okay to recontextualize the first 7 games of the season as this. Pretty darn good. With what I would consider a marquee win against USC. When you factor in the fact you had just lost by 53 to Indiana, and you come home and you get a big win in dramatic fashion against a name brand program that, even if they aren't top 25, certainly has top 25 talent and a complete dud of a coach. And I cannot say that enough. Lincoln Riley absolutely sucks. I wonder how Dre Brown is doing out there after making the move to California. Don't wish him ill, but it seemed like a puzzling move for a coach that was not long for that job, and certainly after that Notre Dame game won't be either. The Duke game. Yeah, Manny Diaz, I'll say it a million times. He's not a good coach. His teams are stupid, but they are talented. And you went on the road and you beat them soundly by 3 scores, 3+ scores. A top 15 Georgia Tech team went in there, and it took them all the way until late in the fourth quarter to finally pull away ahead 2 scores. Those are 2 good wins. They aren't great wins. They are not wins that are going to lock you into the college football playoff, which I will talk every so often about today, though I don't know if in my heart I actually believe this is a playoff team for Illinois. But come on, 5-2. 2 solid wins with that. Opening weekend against Western. Of course, no one's really going to remember that. I understand. Western Michigan was a bad first half and a great second one. And then Purdue was whatever. But Nonetheless, 5 wins in the first 7 games for Illinois football is something worth applauding and worth being happy about, which leads to this game after a bye week. And I mentioned how I think that this game goes a long way, and perhaps the longest of any game on the schedule, and certainly of the games remaining, as to how we feel about this team. Now, Washington's success at home is well documented. 22-3 at home in the last 3 years. Historically, Husky Stadium is a very tough place to play. Really tall stadium. They got these rain roofs that go over it. It will be a rainy day, which we'll talk about in a bit. So for those under the overhang, lucky you. Tough place to play. They got sailgating on the water right next to the stadium. And a pretty rabid fan base. And I will say for the Pacific Northwest, say what you want, but come on. I mean, they love their teams. We saw that with the Mariners series, just how crazy that environment was in Seattle. We saw with the fact that they stole more in the loss of the Supersonics. The people out there do love their sports. So I do expect a tough environment, and I do expect Washington to play some inspired ball after a very uninspiring second half against Michigan. But this game's not about Washington. That, I guess, perspective is everything. Certainly not for us. It's about Washington. It's about this Illinois team. It's about year 5 of Brett Bielema, with so many guys coming back from a 10-win season. The expectations they have for themselves within that Smith Performance Center that some fans, I think, understandably have for this team as well. And if you are to scratch the surface of some of those things, this is a game that you sort of have to win. You can lose this game and still have what I would consider to be a very good season. And we're going to get into the rest of the schedule and the likelihood of Illinois winning 3 or 4 or all 5 games. But I think if we were to look back on this season as truly memorable, it does have to sort of restart on Saturday. And that if they do come out with a performance that would be considered a dud and lose by maybe a couple scores to Washington, we are sitting here thinking, man, well, why do we kind of fall off from last year? Now, that would be a 5-3 record. And if that's falling off for Illinois football nowadays, we'll take it. All of us would. But it is also fair to look at this team a little bit differently than we would next year's team, where if you said, if you go 7-5 in 2026, are you happy? I probably would be, with all the changes that are inevitably going to happen on the roster. 7-5, if you sign me up for that right now, I'd take that for next season, but we aren't there yet. We have a team with 17 returning starters out of 22. We have a team with a really good quarterback. And guys like Luke Altmyer don't grow on quarterback trees. It does not happen. And you actually have, I think, some dudes at other positions on the field that, you know what? You're at least as good as Washington, I think. And then the question falls back to the guy at the top of the program. And right now, this fan base, of course, all is like pro Bielema, as you should be. There's no reason why you would not be a very pro Bielema fan, given what he's done. But I think games like this, what they sort of can feed into is the idea of what kind of ceiling do you have with that coach? An uninspired, lifeless loss of Washington, which I don't see lifeless. That would really surprise me. But let's just say it hypothetically happened. Would I think dampen the spirits of the fan base a little bit and say, well, okay, you are 7-8 wins a year, which we all said we would take. But then you got that tantalizing 10-win season and thought, man, what if every so often you can make a run where you can have a really, really good year? I think it would dampen that spirit a little bit and lead to a Rutgers game where, all right, guys, just take care of business. It's Dad's Day. Oh, we're 6-3, and there are far worse places to be. No, I want to go to the Rutgers game. I'm sure all of you do too. With that extra juice of having went on the road, West Coast, and beaten a Washington team that right now is gettable. They are gettable, despite some top-end talent. I want to see that stadium and take our new tailgate rig to Lot 31 with a 6-2 football team with a very winnable November schedule ahead of them and feel that buzz. As opposed to, well, yeah, when you play good teams, it hasn't went so great this year, except for USC and Duke. And God, doesn't it suck? I'm sorry, I keep reiterating myself here. Doesn't it suck that the 2 best teams you beat this year have complete knuckleheads as coaches? So therefore, we sort of wonder, Well, what's the big deal about beating USC and Duke? Well, you did. Shouldn't be our fault that their coaches are dimwits. Regardless, I'll get off of that. But no, I want a 6-2 team going to that tailgate next week. I want a 6-2 team to talk about on Sunday morning, recapping what to this point would be the biggest one of this season. Because while that USC game at home was a 5-star day and one that I would love to have more repeats of that in my fandom, there is something about a road win that is incredibly validating. And this team, the closest they put 4 quarters together was that USC game. And darn it, if they didn't get close to maybe blowing it late, I think they got another really good game left in them. And often they come with Brett Bielema after bye weeks. So let's talk about it today. Illinois, Washington, 2 5-2 teams, 1 ranked. That's you, not them. And a major opportunity to kind of springboard yourself to a really good second half of the season. Before I get too far ahead of myself, just got to remind you the 200 level is brought to you by our sponsors. The best way you can support us is to support our sponsors. That includes Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits, my favorite restaurant in Champaign, which is saying something because we do have a great restaurant scene. What I love about Hamilton Walkers is it's 5-star service, but not necessarily 5-star prices. It's 5-star food, not necessarily 5-star prices. And for me, it's usually a bone-in steak, medium. The sides that we get are the steak fries, which just have this extra crisp on them. I don't know if they're double fried or what, but they're so freaking good. And then usually either a green bean or asparagus dish, family-style sides that you can share with whoever you're eating with. And, of course, they're patented old-fashioned. I've had many an old-fashioned in my life, and I got to say that still, to this day, the best I've had in Champaign-Urbana. Among many best in Champaign-Urbana, from the food to the drinks to the service, Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. For life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Coming up now on our, we moved in this house 5 years ago, and that was when we got started with Brian and his staff. We have a home and auto bundle. State Farm prices, super reasonable. Some of the best rates, of course, but what I appreciate about Brian and his staff is just how attentive they are, how quick they are to communicate anything that may be coming up, or just kind of checking in on your policy and see if there's anything they can add to it. Awesome to work with. That's State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. It is not too late to get that furnace check scheduled. You probably want to get on that. You might have noticed it's a little bit chillier. Our furnace, actually, it's running right now because it's under 60 degrees outside. But the good thing is it hasn't been running all the time because it's running efficiently. And that's thanks to them. It's a 15-year-old HVAC system here, running excellently because of some servicing that they've done on it. And it probably has a few years left in it, thanks to the service experts at Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. 217-841-4728. Finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com for your next home improvement project. Check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. Luke, big Illini fan, I know. What's great about them is they're really good at communicating, which is not always the case for those that have worked with contractors, not always the case. So check out a gallery, again, of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. While you're there, get a free quote. Also, Champagne Showers Podcast Network. Appreciate them and appreciate you, the listeners and the viewers across all 3 platforms today. Facebook, I get a lot on there. I think Facebook is a dying social media app full of just bad memes, and I'm not an ageist. Let's just say they're more of my aunt and uncle's age range that are populating Facebook. But I am on Facebook, and we're on YouTube and X as well. So hello to those streaming us on a Wednesday afternoon. If you got any thoughts, throw it in the comment section. Appreciate you, and I'll make sure to get to that before we get out of here. Brett, I see one in there as well, and I will get to that as we talk about this conversation of why this game is important. Okay, I talked about the temperature of the fan base, and it's good. I think fans are happy. I think fans are perhaps, what would we say, waiting for a big moment. And I will caution you by saying I don't know what that big moment is given the schedule other than win on Saturday. And even if they do, is a win at Washington going to feel as momentous as Michigan last year. And yeah, I know Michigan didn't have a quarterback, but all the circumstances around that game, it was just a blissfully happy experience. Kansas, because of that extra feeling that you had to get that win. No, I don't think it would have that. But I mentioned the word validation earlier, and I think the validating part of a win like this on Saturday would be for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that getting a road win in a tough environment is kind of a sign that you didn't just beat the teams you were supposed to, but you might have gotten a win that you weren't supposed to. Washington and Illinois, I would imagine, talent-wise, right now, are fairly even. I know there's some speed on Washington's offense at the playmaking positions, including their 19-year-old quarterback, and that is a concern because I don't know if team defensive speed for Illinois is necessarily elite. In fact, I know it's probably not. So, of course, that is a concern. But I think overall, when you would stack up the rosters against each other, 2 years removed from Washington being the national title game and what Jedd Fisch has overseen there, I think that's still probably even Steven at this point. I don't think there's a big divergence there. I think historically I would take Brett Bielema over Jedd Fisch, who's a very good offensive mind, but had a very up and down kind of first year. And maybe he's stabilizing things, or maybe their record of 5-2 is actually a little bit inflated, which we will talk about. But there is something validating about winning a game that you are not supposed to win. USC was that. And yet Lincoln Riley and just the toxic nature around that idiot's name somehow make that win seem less awesome when in fact it was awesome, and you should be very happy about that. Duke is not a historically good football program, and while it was a road game, it was in front of like 5,000 Duke fans and 10,000 Illini fans because they don't give a crap out there. They were half empty when number 12 Georgia Tech came to town, and Duke had been on a 4 or 5 game win streak. So it just isn't going to pop the same way that a win at Washington would. And on top of that, there's not any win that you could get in November that is going to make fans say, whoa, look at that. The only way that you could do that in November is by just blowing teams out. But even then, you kind of know, just given the schedule, that none of these guys are actually good. Brett, this goes to your point here. I think the narrative around our 2 losses is going to be a huge hurdle to getting into the playoff at 10-2. We have to blow teams out down the stretch to get in my opinion. Brett, you might be right. You don't need to blow out Washington, though. This would be just a win, even by a half point if such a thing existed, and get out of there. And then you're right. Stall points would probably have to happen in the last 4. But let's not discount the fact that Indiana and Ohio State will likely both be 12-0. And 53 points, of course, that looks bad. The Ohio State loss doesn't look bad when you compare them, the margin of it, to other wins that they've had. I don't know. I think a college football playoff committee would be fairly forgiving if you're 10-2 with some impressive wins down the stretch, margin-wise, for sure. And those 2 losses are to your number 1 and 2 seeds. How are we going to fault them for that? It is a shame that if we were watching the games on Saturday and seeing USC and Duke miss opportunities, thinking, damn, what if both of those teams went 9-3 and you were the 10-2 team that beat them? That looks that much better. Well, listen, USC and Duke will continue to win a few more games, but you're looking more at the 8-4, 7-5 variety. Is that going to be enough to get you in? I don't know. But don't sleep on the fact that the Big Ten is super influential and will get 4 teams into this playoff. Come hell or high water, they will. It'll happen. And there's already 3 that are basically locked in. Ohio State and Indiana, they're locked in. They're in the playoff. They will not lose any amount of games that would keep them out. Oregon, come on. They'll probably win out. Playoff, okay, great. So that leaves that 4th opening. And is it a Michigan team that would have to win out, including a win against Ohio State? Is it USC? Psh, no. Could be Washington, but again, they would have to win out. And I think they still have Oregon to play. I'm not 100% sure, though. So, yeah, that's all there. But I do think just from a validation perspective, winning a game that people truly feel like, I don't know if this is in the cards, goes a long way in saying, oh, wow, we potentially are not just matching expectations, but going above them a little bit. I think Illinois is going to win on Saturday. I'm not going to bury the lead. I think they are going to win on Saturday. And I said that before the Indiana game, but I will be honest with you in hindsight. The Indiana game, early enough in the year that it was, was an example of me placing too much emphasis on a couple of not so great Indiana quarters. And it was also me placing way too much emphasis on, well, Illinois hasn't put a full game together. It's going to happen Saturday, and they're going to get that gritty road win. Well, not even close. So if that's disqualifying, I would understand it. But I do have reasons why I think Illinois wins this game Saturday. And we can start with the bye week conversation. This is a narrative that has emerged while Brett Bielema has been here. I want to make sure that I get this accurate. So just give me a second as I go to the Brett Bielema Wikipedia page and check out his records and everything. But if we were to work backwards for Brett Bielema and his bye weeks, last year you did have a win after your bye week against Purdue, and I know that doesn't sound all that great, 50-49 in overtime. The bye week, for whatever reason, was not the boon before Ryan Walters came to town that you would have hoped it would be. More Ryan Walters conversation coming up. You did resoundingly beat Michigan State on November 16th. That was after 2 straight losses and a much-needed bye week. Okay. 2-0. I know the Purdue game felt like a loss in many ways, but that's 2-0 right there after bye weeks. The year before that, 2023, which was not a very memorable season, at least not in the right ways. Your bye weeks came after a loss against Wisconsin at home, heartbreaker. You had a bye week, and then you won at Minnesota. Was that the only bye week that year? It looks like it was. Okay, so there you are, 3-0. Unless I'm missing another one, that's 3-0 in the last 2 years after bye weeks. Back in 2022, your bye week would have been, well, I think it's okay to factor in, God, you played Chattanooga on September 22nd on a Thursday and Wisconsin the next Saturday. The Chattanooga game itself came 12 days after beating Virginia at home. You won all of those, but none of those are technically bye weeks, I don't believe. Is that right? I guess before Chattanooga. So we'll call it 4-0. And then at Nebraska, that was a bye week. After you beat Minnesota at home, you were 6-1, and you won at Nebraska. That is 5-0 in the last 3 years after bye weeks. 2021, there has to be a loss here. I know there is. Your bye weeks came after Wisconsin, losing at home 24-0, but it was not as close as the score indicated. You won at Penn State after the bye week. Am I missing one here? Oh, that's the other one. At Iowa, after a bye week, beating Minnesota on the road, you lost at Iowa by 10. Though not a bad performance. And if I recall, didn't Brett Bielema have COVID? And was it Archie McDaniel or Greg McDonald? Or who was your interim coach? I feel like Brett Bielema didn't coach that game. Regardless, there is your 5-1 with some impressive wins in there. So if you're asking, well, why do you feel confident going into this game Saturday? Bye week is number one. And if we just look at this team, boy, do we need a bye week. I prefer that it came after Ohio State, not before, because I don't think a bye week before Ohio State, does a whole lot to change your fortunes in that game. I think it has a much better chance of impacting a game like Washington. So therefore, I like the fact that you had the 7-game blitz. Even Ohio State is game 7, and then you get your break. This team needed it. According to Brett Bielema, they are healthy. Except for Xavier Scott, they are a healthy team right now. And that includes Khalil Valentine, who he says the running backs are good to go. It looked bad against Ohio State, but that's tremendous news if so, especially on what looks to be a day where running the ball is going to be important. So the bye week is a narrative that I do buy into, at least for the fact that Illinois will show up prepared, a very good game plan, and now it's just a matter of execution. And you are an older team, and there's some trust I have in that. That is number 2, older team. And we can start with the most important position on the field, 23-year-old Luke Altmyer, 19-year-old DeMond Williams. Luke Altmyer had a really rough game, like everybody at Indiana. Other than that, and then a couple of turnovers against Ohio State, we have seen, for the most part, Luke Altmyer is comfortable against Big Ten opponents, comfortable to very, very good. DeMond Williams is a special talent, but 19 is still 19. That is a distinct lack of experience compared to Luke Altmyer. I would imagine there's some trickle down with rosters, though I would have to look closer at Washington to see how many juniors and seniors are on each unit. But if you just start with the most important position on the field, the signal caller, the guy that will likely have the ball with a chance to win the game in the fourth quarter, because this is going to be a close game, I'm sure. I'll take Luke Altmyer in this particular matchup. In hindsight, I probably should have given more credit to Mendoza and Signetti being his coach and being the coaching unicorn that he is. Julian saying, okay, he's having a special season. He's also playing for Ohio State. Damon Williams is young. Julian saying, I think, is 20, 21. So that's not unheard of for young quarterbacks to be extremely good. I'm just saying I do think that plays a factor in this game where every factor counts because of how close you are matchup-wise. So we get the bye week. We have experience, especially at the quarterback position. I'm going to throw this out there, and if this sounds a little bit like I'm grasping at straws, I understand. The weather. Rainy, cloudy, windy, cool. It's the Pacific Northwest. Shocking, I know. There's a reason why they have those rain roofs at Husky Stadium for days like this. The reason why this weather forecast, I think, is actually beneficial to Illinois is how it takes a little bit of that top-end speed off of an offense. There's this old adage with football that the offense, or offensive playmakers in particular, always have an advantage because they know where they're going. And a defense can merely react to that. So that's why when you have a shutdown corner, it's a really special thing because they are already behind the 8 ball in terms of, okay, well, where is my guy going? The receiver knows where he's going. And if it's a beautiful sunny day in the Pacific Northwest, I'm guessing the Boston, their best receiver, I'm guessing some of the running backs can get to those spots and maybe gash Illinois a little bit. But when you take just a little bit of that off, just a 0.2 seconds on the 40 time or whatever it may be, a little bit of that lateral quickness off, it makes me feel a little bit better about Illinois not giving up as many huge plays. That has been a problem for this defense, so they did a really good job against Ohio State with it and really recovered after that Purdue game. Just keep things in front of you. I think on a rainy day in Seattle, that could play against a Washington team that will get points and will get yardage. But can you keep them from gashing you? And on the flip side, can you in your run game really get things going? Because Washington has not been good against the run in the last few weeks. Michigan ran all over them. And I think that is an area where you can exploit this Washington team. Now, those factors, bye week, experience of the quarterback position, weather, might sound like, oh man, come on. Do you actually believe this, or are you just trying to find any sort of narrative you can go with? Well, maybe there's a little bit of truth in both, but I'll say this. Unlike the Indiana game where I just said, well, we're going to put it all together. I don't even know if Illinois needs to play an A-plus game in order to get this done. If this were Ohio State, we all knew A-plus game or bust. And they played a C-plus, and they lost by 3 scores. Okay? Well, that tracks. I think a B-plus game still gets this done. I think that a Washington team that has not been particularly good of late, that's another reason why you should feel confident. I'm going to end this kind of 4-pronged why I think Illinois is going to win with a little bit about Washington and what they've been doing of late. Now, I love this website, K Ford Ratings, even though Kelly Ford is his name, does not particularly love Illinois, and last year had him in the 30s, and this year has him in the low 20s, which is pretty good, but certainly not, college football playoff caliber. But he has Illinois and Washington 7th and 8th accordingly in the Big Ten. And when I look at this Illinois team and the sort of kind of one-sheeter that he has from, he gives Illinois a 38% chance to win at Washington. He has Illinois ranked 25th overall. He has Washington ranked 24th, neck and neck. Illinois with the 17th best offense. He has Washington with the 22nd. Illinois with the 50th best defense, which for Big Ten is not very good. Washington, 37. Fine, but not great. Special teams, Illinois, 5th. Washington, 89th. Now, I did not factor in the special teams thing as why Illinois is going to win this game, but I don't know. Field goals matter. You got a great kicker. Kicking is going to matter in this game. Punting is going to matter. Okay, so all that aside, though, if we focus on Washington and what they've done recently, they opened the season with 3 impressive offensive performances. 38, 70, and 59 points against Colorado State, UC Davis, and Washington State. Now, the best team of that bunch, according to K Ford ratings, was Washington State, 82nd best team in the nation. Now, you had to win against Duke, and they're in the 40s, so that's a decent quality win for Illinois. Now, I don't fault Washington for that because I think there is something to be said about just play 3 scrubs, get the wins, and move on. That's what Indiana did, and they're doing A-okay. Here are the last 4 games, though. Ohio State comes to town. Washington loses 24-6. Okay, no harm in that. At Maryland, you talk about dum-dums as coaches, and I know that sounds like an insult. I'm not trying to be too mean, but okay, Mike Locksley, come on. How many times are we going to do this? He starts 4-1, and then they crap their pants the rest of the year to a 5-7, 6-6 record. Maybe they'll play the Pinstripe Bowl. Maybe. That's what Mike Locksley does. And that game was a summation of the Mike Locksley experience. I'm pretty sure Maryland was up 20-0. They lose 24-20. Okay, now, impressive road comeback for Washington. East Coast road trip, not easy. They deserve credit for that, just like Maryland deserves a little bit of grief. Rutgers, the most impressive win thus far in the Big Ten for Washington. 38-19. That was after a rough first quarter and a half, but that offense got cooking against Rutgers. Bear in mind, though, Maryland, according to K Ford ratings, 60th best team in the country. Rutgers, 62. Their wins thus far, the 99th, 82nd, 60th, and 62nd best teams in the country. UC Davis was an FCS bye game. Okay, fine. At Michigan, 24-7 loss. Things fell apart in the second half. I thought Washington was going to win that game after watching the first half. I actually put money on it. This is why I suck at gambling. No, they didn't score. And in fact, they only ran 4 plays in the fourth quarter. So here's Brett Bielema. He's looking at his chops. He's thinking, oh, man, shorten this game. That's my bread and butter. We're going to shorten this game. Now, the interesting dilemma here is that Brett Bielema, after the Ohio State game, did say, well, we need to play with more pace on offense. Well, I would agree with that, and I think they probably will. So how do you shorten a game? Well, in that way, the Aaron Henry defense that you saw against an Ohio State might prove to be effective if you do force a DeMond Williams to go on 10, 11, 12-play drives in the rain in those conditions. Is that going to lead to a game where each team has the ball 12 times and a half? Probably not. I do think shortening the game is in their mind, and I think Illinois has the ability to maybe do just that and make this a game where the first one to 27 or 28 wins. I could see that happening. So, without sounding dismissive, I ask you, what is the most impressive win that Washington has had this year? And the follow-up I'd ask is, really, how good has their offense been in the Big Ten? Maryland has a decent defense. Falling apart or not late in the game, Washington had a really good second half in Maryland. And that is for sure. Rutgers sucks. I mean, Ethan Kaliakmanis had a good start to the year throwing the ball. They can score a little bit. They got some 6'6" wide receiver. Their defense is god-awful. They're one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. So, I don't know. I'm looking at this resume, and I'm understanding why, ratings got inflated and why they were top 25 or were they borderline last week against Michigan. I understand it. There's talent on that team. They were a good team that will probably, at Wisconsin, Purdue at home, at UCLA, they're probably still going to go, they're going to get 8 wins, I'm pretty sure, somehow, some way. And if they beat Illinois, they could look at 9. And then they could say, well, wait, we're hosting Oregon at the end of the year. They would have a case for winning out, gets them into the playoff. So they're in the same boat as you are in that. I'm just looking at them and not seeing this unbeatable beast that some may presume because you're going on the road against a Husky team that doesn't often lose at home. In fact, I actually think there's quite a few vulnerabilities. That includes Ryan Walters' defense. And I know that there's a narrative, though. Oh, God, we're doing this again. Ryan Walters. Trust me, I can't stand the guy either. I'm going to see his big old pumped up biceps and his probably, way too tight purple shirt on Saturday. And he's going to be, it's like a permanent flex. It's like, look at how muscular I can be at age 40. Good for you. But he's not the head coach. The Illinois players, whatever emotional attachment they still had to their former defensive coordinator, I think that impacted the Purdue games the last 2 years. I think it had an impact on last year's Purdue game and all the weirdness that ensued. Ryan Walters is not going to be calling the offensive plays for Washington like he did for Purdue last year. That damn near won them the game, and one of the weirdest wins and most terrifying wins I think I'll ever see. I just don't think the Ryan Walters factor is going to be as big here. And keep in mind, Luke Altmyer in that offense scored 50 points on Ryan Walters' defense last year. He's got more playmakers on this defense, of course. But it is an exploitable defense. And while he's not going 90% man like he did back in 2022 here, he does do a lot of man. Okay, well, that's fine, but that's not really good against the run. Because if you got a man look in your secondary, then that just means that they're looking a little bit less at the line of scrimmage and more at their wide receiver. Illinois does have good blocking wide receivers. So if he decides to be the aggressive Ryan Walters on a rainy day in Seattle, I think that bodes well for Illinois' run offense. And I do think there's enough talent in our receiving room to occasionally break loose and make some big plays against those guys. I don't know if you thought that this podcast was going to be me, coming out and just giving you every reason why Illinois should win this game. I don't think Washington's actually been that great. And one could easily say, well, how good has Illinois been? And you'd be right. You'd be right. They have basically been about as good when all things are considered. But even though USC is just dumb, that's still a good win. And Duke is dumb, but that's still a good win. And that's 2 good wins, and I don't think that there's one yet for Washington. I also think that there's just something about, okay, God, you get the bye week, take a breath, get healthy, look at the Ohio State tape. Damn it, if we would have done this, that, and the other. And you come out a little bit ticked, hopefully you channel that in a positive way and clean up some of the messes that you had in the Ohio State loss or even in the Purdue win. Realize that you have gotten better. Realize that your offense, when it gets rolling, is really damn good. And go out there and score 30 points and win the game. I'm going to make a prediction right now, and I hope it doesn't seem foolish on Saturday. If Illinois scores 30 points on Saturday, I think they win. And trust me, I'm not sitting here as someone that thinks Aaron Henry is a defensive guru. My concern is that he's not at all. But with the bye week, and with Brett Bielema being a little bit more hands-on, perhaps, with the defense, I feel heartened that they're going to come out with a good game plan. And just like Ohio State, where the game plan was fine, and if it weren't for all the short fields, they probably would have held Ohio State to like 24, 27 points. I think there is an opportunity here to keep Washington's offense from going crazy. And that's all you're asking for the defense. Just be serviceable. Washington can score 24, maybe 27 points, and you could still win the game. I do not expect a blowout. I know I gave you every reason why Illinois is going to win. No, Washington's good, and they will win 8 or 9 games. Illinois is good, and 8 wins almost would be worst-case scenario at this point, given the rest of the schedule that you have, but they have an opportunity for 9 or 10, and a better opportunity for 10 than even Washington does. Both teams have a lot to play for. But a fresh Illinois team off a bye week, extra preparation, being able to laser focus on Washington, being able to watch the game, Michigan and Washington live, and do some scouting for those 3.5 hours. I'm sure all the players are watching that game too. It was the first game on last Saturday and one of the few decent ones at 11. And yeah, I like all the things that lined up for this. And it's funny, before the season started and we made prognostications, and I said 9-3. And if you would have asked me, I would have said, well, you're going to lose one of the Duke, Indiana, or USC games. You're going to lose one of those. You're going to lose to Ohio State, and then maybe one more, the likeliest being at Washington. And then I said, well, wait a second. That Washington game, it is very easy to just chalk it up as a loss. Cross-country trip. Not many teams win there. Trust me, I thought from the minute I saw at Washington, damn it, why can't it be at UCLA this year? Well, actually, I would probably still rather play UCLA, but I would be hesitant to puff my chest out before a game like that right now, the way they're playing. So I don't know. Timing's everything. I just think the timing works here for this Illinois team at this Washington team on this week when Washington's playing their 6th straight game. And you're fresh. I just think it works. So, yeah, there you go, guys. I mean, I didn't necessarily come in thinking, all right, this is in the bag, but I feel pretty darn good about it. I got a few comments here. I got this from Truthfully Speaking. As a Big Ten school, 10-2 should get us a playoff berth. If Ohio State and Indiana remain 1-2, theoretically, we have the 2 best losses in the country. Are we a football school? Sure feels like it. I think truthfully, let me get to that macro question in a bit, but I do think that the losses to 1-2, who will remain 1-2, don't look as bad on December 6th or whatever. Like if you go 10-2, you are in the Big Ten championship game. You're just sitting there that final championship weekend along with probably Oregon as the only other Big Ten team with 10-plus wins. And then all these other chips fall where they may, and I just feel like, yeah, you're probably in the playoff. To give you an example, guys, remember the BCS era? And in 2007, Illinois didn't really have any business being in the Rose Bowl. The Big Ten has weight. The Big Ten has influence. They want 4 teams in the playoff. Arguably, considering the last 2 national champions have been from the Big Ten, they deserve 4 teams in the playoffs. They'll get it. If Illinois is 10-2, I think they're in. Now, if you hear from Anthony, let's see if I got this right here, Anthony. Would the CFP only take 3 teams from the Big Ten? I don't think so, Anthony. That's exactly it. I think they would take 4 because that still leaves 8. Probably 4 Big Ten, 4 SEC, 2 Big 12, 1 ACC. Yeah, guys, 4 Big Ten teams are getting in this thing. You are in the best conference possible for getting a shot at the college football playoff. This is where you want to be. Also from Anthony, I think people underestimated Indiana when we played them. I think our loss was when Indiana was rising. I underestimated them, Anthony. I thought that, well, talent is probably all the same. I think that Curt Cignetti has been an incredible evaluator, so they probably are more talented. They aren't doing what they're doing with that talent. But as I've said before, and we'll say again, the dude is a coaching unicorn. From Anthony, I think we were sacrificed to Indiana as their image was rising. Nobody took them seriously until they played the Illini. Yeah, the good news about that, Anthony, is I think the bigger takeaway that game was, whoa, Indiana is really good. I think that was most people's takeaway. And them winning at Oregon only solidified that fact. They are national title contenders. I mean, they are. I know they're number 2, so that's not outrageous to say, but Indiana football could win a national title. I know. Gag me with the spoon. I don't like the thought of it either. But it could very well happen this year, and it would be incredible. That would be sports history, and I think that Ohio State, Indiana playing in that Big Ten title game might not be the only time they play. Because I'm not seeing other teams. Alabama, sure. I the way they're playing now. But I'm sorry, Kalen DeBoer, Curt Cignetti, I know who I'm picking in a theoretical matchup between those two. And if Indiana keeps doing this, then they won't be playing any opening round CFP games. They will go straight to whatever the semifinals are. I guess those would be quarterfinals. And they would get a favorable matchup against 8th or 9th ranked team and probably a decent SEC team, like maybe even a Georgia. And that's tough. But, dude, Indiana is freaking good. They are just, I mean, when you hear Urban Meyer say this is like the best coaching he's ever seen, you can say what you want about Urban Meyer, but the guy knows coaching. And the record seems to bear out the fact that Curt Cignetti is just that good. So, yeah, everybody. I mean, I wish I could give you more. Of course, there's reasons to be, skeptical about a win at Washington because this team, this Illinois team, despite the 5-2 record, has had some ugly quarters. And if they were to have more than one ugly quarter at Washington, that's probably going to be one too many. But I just don't think it's a game where you need to be perfect. I don't expect Washington to be perfect. I don't expect you to get 10 out of 10 Washington 6 weeks into the stretch they've been playing and not playing particularly great offense. They're going to score more against you than they did against Michigan. If you held them to 7 points, I will eat a hat. And I know I've offered to do that many times, but if Aaron Henry holds them to 7 points, I'll eat a hat right here on the podcast. But short of that, give up 24. It's fine, man. And I think it actually can be done. I think in a weird way, the Ohio State game was heartening to see that, okay, Purdue and whatever weird voodoo magic Ryan Brown has against you, which that guy stinks. I'm sorry. He looks terrible. Northwestern made him look awful, and we'll get to Northwestern when we get to them. They're being peskily annoying again. But I think there are quite a few positive things to take from the defense. I think also, one thing I did not mention, their offensive line in Washington has had a few injuries. They might all be back on Saturday, according to Jed Fish, but there's no guarantee. So if that is the case, then you got maybe Gabe Akis finally having his game. Or you have, I know their 2 tight ends are essentially out for Washington. So that's something where they can't really do that 12 front that they would maybe want to do on a day where running the ball is going to be of utmost importance. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel good about it. I hope I'm right. I would love to come back here Sunday morning and talk about a huge win in Washington, because that's what it would be. If any of this sounded dismissive towards Washington, that wasn't my goal. I think it's more just, all right, you're about on equal footing, but I like these variables in Illinois' favor compared to the Huskies, and God, I hope that bears out, because being 6-2 with a road win like that, with Rutgers coming into town, and by the way, I mentioned this Kelly Ford projections. It's at kfordratings.com. He gives Illinois an 81% chance to beat Rutgers, 79 to beat Maryland, 80 to beat Wisconsin, 79 to beat Northwestern. These are the 62nd, 60th, 67th, and 59th best teams in the country. Of course, Washington is the best of the bunch. But yes, if you beat Washington, we're talking about winning out. It's right there for them. I think they know it. I think they know that if they win out there in the college football playoff, and we can talk that in earnest if they do win on Saturday. And all of a sudden, it just makes it 4-game checklist. Okay, beat Rutgers, beat Maryland, beat Wisconsin, beat Northwestern, and essentially you're probably in. Wouldn't that make November that much more exciting? But it starts Saturday, October 25th at Washington. So we'll see what happens, but I feel good about it. All right. Appreciate you all for tuning in on this Wednesday afternoon, for those that are streaming along with us. Do me a favor before you leave, if you could like, subscribe, follow, wherever you happen to be watching or streaming us. Same thing if you're listening to the audio component, whether you're Spotify, Apple Podcast, be sure to follow the podcast and you will get them as they are published. And Sunday morning will be the next one as we recap whatever happens in Seattle. Before I get out of here, got to remind you, the 200 level is brought to you by Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. Steak, seafood, and spirits. My favorite place in Champaign, great for pregame meals, date nights, informal, formal. It really is a place that no matter what the occasion is, you cannot go wrong with Hamilton Walkers. State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy and can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728 and get that furnace check scheduled. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. For your next home improvement project, check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. All right, everybody, Champagne Showers Podcast Network, appreciate them. Appreciate you for tuning in and watching and or listening, however you consume the 200 level. We will see you in a few days on a Sunday morning where hopefully we can talk about a huge victory at Washington. Have a great rest of your week, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. It is the 200 level.